So with that, I want to introduce Jane, my colleague, who, when I was brought into the Swedenborg Church, I'd already been ordained. We had the same service where Jane was ordained, so we have a special bond there as well. So Jane, it's very lovely to have you here with your wisdom. We're very grateful for it and grateful for your service. So look forward to your wisdom today.
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. And thank you, Katerina, for reaching out and just giving me the ropes of how this all works. I'm excited to be with you all today. And I, too, was looking back to the times that I visited our national church in DC, that beautiful, gorgeous, huge, huge sanctuary. And the challenges that Rich faced when he took on that responsibility, and the times that we tried to figure out how to make it more inviting, air conditioning, the different things. But eventually we realized that that church was just too big and needed too much. And the decision was made, as he said, and as many of you know, to sell that beautiful church. I see Dr. Peck there, who was a part of all of this. And I want you to know that I appreciate all the work that you have done to create this new Swedenborg house. And I want you to know that the denomination is behind you all the way. We're excited about what you're doing. We support you financially and spiritually, and the gifts that you are bringing to the people that come to the services and being right there in DC. And I also was thinking about what in the world would it be like to live in DC right now? I live in Lawrence, Kansas, the blue dot in Kansas, and I am happy I am here. And, we protest here on Sunday. Every Sunday, we go to the corner of Massachusetts Street and 9th Street and carry our placards. And, the cars drive by and they honk in appreciation. But every once in a while, and not very often, but that's kind of what you remember, is when someone drives by in their pickup and they rev the engine and they blow exhaust in our face. And that's what I worry about most, is the division and the people that really feel like they understand from their viewpoint what's going on. And my prayer, I guess, is that eyes will be opened and things will be evened out and people will come together and realize about our future and where we're headed. One of the things you may not know that I wanted to mention, Kansas was named the Free State. It came into the Union in 1861, and it was a time that it was kind of the dividing line between the pro-slavery and the anti-slavery. And our motto is ad astro per aspera, to the stars through difficulties. And I think that is where we are today. And my prayer is that we will all come to live in a free state. May it be so. And so I want you today to just open your mind to a totally different subject, as I just wanted to mention that I think we're all going through a really difficult time in our country, but I haven't lost hope. And I hope that you are able to hang on also in DC and wherever you are around the country, to the hope that all, as Julian of Norwich tells us, all things shall be well. All manner of things shall be well. I just hope it's in my lifetime. So what I want to share with you today is this new passion I have, and I am really excited about it. It combines three parts: that 18th century scientist, mystic, and theologian, Emanuel Swedenborg; the 20th century renowned psychologist and Swedenborgian scholar, Wilson Van Dusen, that we read the quotes from; and the 21st century psychotherapeutic evolution of what is called internal family systems. And some of you may be more familiar with internal family systems than I am, because I'm a novice to it, and I don't profess to be an expert in any three of these subjects. But I've been listening to my divine whisper, and I've been working through this IFS within my own self. And there's just this wonderful commonality between Swedenborg and Wilson Van Dusen, who was a scholar and a reader of Swedenborg, a psychotherapist, and what is this relatively new internal family systems. It's been around for a while, but it's making a change because it is becoming more connected to our own spirituality and the necessity for the spiritual and the natural to come together for true healing. So I want to talk first a little bit, and most of you are very familiar. I see people out there like Chris Leitner, and I wish I could see all of you, Robert McCleskey, Gard Perry. I see a lot of my fellow ministers out there that know about Swedenborg, but I just want a brief introduction for those of you that maybe it's a little newer to, because he was this curious gentleman and extremely intelligent. There's really no way to measure his intelligence, but often people put him within the top 5 of people that, and their intelligence and their understanding. And what was so unique, what I have always found fascinating about him, when he wanted to know something, like he wanted to know how to telescope work. So he traveled to Europe and he worked with somebody that was a lens grinder for the telescope and made one so that he could understand it. And then after this scientist career and the things that he had done, which fill books, he wanted to figure out where the soul was located. He watched autopsies, anatomical dissections at his home university in Sweden. That was his first step to figure this all out. He was fluent in 9 different languages, and I just found out recently that he was never comfortable speaking in public groups because he stammered when he was nervous, but he could write, and he did that profusely. We have so much that he has written. But this search for the physical location of the soul, it took Swedenborg from this door of that physiology and all that he had learned about the body through watching dissections, and it took it into the internal person, to the psychology. So that move from the external to the internal 300 years ago was at a time when psychology really was not developed. It was more about philosophy and religion and moral matters. But Swedenborg, the way he studied, he approached that same direction with the soul. So he took a giant step and he tried to explain the mental experience by going within. First of all, you can find out a lot of facts trying to read about a subject, but there wasn't much written yet, really probably not anything about that internal. And so his idea was, I'm going to observe my own inner processes and try to understand the psychology behind it and why I make the decisions I am and understand myself. And that way I can be more related to the psychology, not just the exterior, but also understand the internal self. His intellect went inward to find that wellspring of the psyche, and the scientist became a mystic after he looked within. And then I want to bring in a quick discussion about Wilson Van Dusen. 200 years later, in the mid-20th century, Dr. Van Dusen was a renowned psychologist, and he worked with schizophrenics for 17 years. He served as the clinical chief psychologist at Mendocino, California, working with schizophrenics during that time. And somehow, he has told me the story, but I don't exactly remember, he found his way to Swedenborg. He found it in a bookstore, and he started reading about this. And he realized he needed, instead of just to blow off these inner voices that these schizophrenics were hearing from, what would happen if he actually acknowledged them? What would happen if he talked to them? What would they have to say? And question them and learn from them. This is so much like Swedenborg in his quest for knowledge. And he is known now for an unconventional career that blended psychology with spiritual exploration. And it was very successful. He wrote many books, including The Presence of Other Worlds and The Natural Depth in Man. And he's known for this unusual bridge between clinical psychology and the spiritual and mystical exploration. And I must add that he was one of the few authors and few writers that could take Swedenborg's writings and make them accessible to the common reader, like me. I had the pleasure and honor of visiting him and his wife many times in his home in Ukiah, California, where I would go and just want to sit at his feet and listen to him. But he was the type of person, I'm sure you all know this person, they want to know more about you and would question you when you're around, because he was constantly learning than actually the information that he would give. And every time I went, I had my list of questions that I wanted to ask him. But afterwards, I realized he's just more interested in learning than maybe in teaching. But it was a joy to be with him. He, as we read, what was the name of the person that read? All I see is a K, but thank you for reading those in such a precise and good way.
Yeah, no problem. Kevin, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Van Dusen always said that self-knowledge requires exploring the inner dimensions of consciousness, way beyond that ego mind that we also think about. And the way he explained it, and this is what kind of related to what Swedenborg said, is there's a conflict between the higher internal mind and the lower external mind. Swedenborg described this more as a temptation or a combat. So the struggle itself is necessary so that a person may become conscious and decide why they act the way they do, decide about their own values, and that shapes their ultimate or external experience. I want to repeat that because this is, to me, the crux of how IFS is working also. So our internal mind and our lower mind are often kind of out of sync, and one will be saying one thing and one will be saying another. And the goal and what we do is to want to bring those together as one, because that's where peace is found. And that's sometimes called integration or mental health or well-being. It's healing rather than just masking the problem. And this is where the confluence with the internal family system comes. For me, this came together as I read this new book that was just published in 2025 by the Swedenborg Foundation. It's called Opening the Inner World, Spiritual Healing, Internal Family Systems, and Emanuel Swedenborg. And it lays out this discussion that was brought together by Chelsea Odner, who's a lifelong student of Swedenborg and also an IFS practitioner. Her father, Jonathan Rose, a scholar and translator of Emanuel Swedenborg, with Robert Faulkner, a pioneering IFS therapist working to bridge spirituality and IFS. He found his way to reading Swedenborg by the work of Wilson Van Dusen. All of these things just kind of fit together. He says, this is Robert Faulkner, I think all healing is fundamentally spiritual, and cognitive behavioral therapy is not spiritual. It's like putting little Band-Aids on a wound and a little padding so you don't get smashed too much. But any significant healing must be spiritual. The coming together of Swedenborg and a reputable big-time major psychologist, Van Dusen, is a huge milestone. On the back of the book is this explanation. In a world where mental health and spiritual well-being are increasingly recognized as interconnected, opening the inner world bridges the often perceived gap between psychology and spirituality, providing a comprehensive framework for understanding the human experience in all its complexity, whether you're a mental health professional, a spiritual seeker, or someone longing for a deeper self-understanding. Opening the Inner World, this book provides actionable insight and guidance for spiritual healing. The founder of Internal Family Systems was Richard Schwartz. And he wrote, for those interested in the spiritual side of IFS, Swedenborg points to words we have yet to explore. And just this week, Richard Schwartz announced on Facebook, and I'm sure in a lot of other places, that he's providing a 10-week course, online course in IFS The Spirituality of Internal Family Systems, a Practice-Based Journey to Your Sacred Self. So for many years, he was holding kind of, it needs to be, IFS needs to be scientific to be accepted. And now it's moving more into that spiritual framework. So I want to just take a few minutes. I want to draw these three together as best I have personally, what I have learned about family systems, going within and working on myself. And I apologize if my cat comes in front of the camera, but he's interested here too. So, Kitty, I lost my place. So what I want to look at today, and what I was drawn to do, is to stop and ask myself, why do I react as the way I do when things happen? When little irritations can blow up in my mind? Why? I was curious about where the conflict within me comes from, like the voice telling me in the morning to get up and be productive, and the other voice saying, you're retired, just roll over, go back to sleep. IFS allows me to pause, and it offers me a process for curiosity. That curiosity that then leads to introspection and reflection, and then leads to compassion for who I am and the parts of me that are trying to get my attention and to figure out the reasons for this. IFS allows me to pause and offers me a process for this curiosity and ensures me that I have this undeniable wise self within me that I cannot harm, and we all have it, and it's all there. It's an undeniable wise self, also thought of as an unconditional loving source. That's the word I'm using for the divine whisper within me. Uniquely mine. That whisper that wasn't in the earthquake, and it wasn't in the fire, and it wasn't in the wind. That whisper that is within me, the calm within me, to guide me through the mountains and valleys of life. And for those times where I bash myself with those words of scripture, like from Romans 7:15, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do, but what I do not want to do, I do. IFS teaches me how to approach these parts of myself with curiosity, introspection, and compassion, and to rely on that divine whisper for help and guidance. This corresponds so much to what Swedenborg said and explored 300 years ago, where he said, one is free to think as they please, and to the end that their life's love may emerge from his hiding place into the light of understanding. Let me read that again, because Swedenborg is not real easy. One is free to think as they please, to the end that their life's love may emerge from its hiding place to the light of understanding. That's the love coming out and combining with the wisdom. And he also said, there is given to everyone an internal sense or an internal personhood by which one can perceive spiritual things. But this sense is closed with those who are in mere natural things. So instead of staying on the outside of what happens to us, those external influences, like when someone says, my parents divorced when I was 12, and that's the reason I'm the way I am and why I react to triggers. IFS guides us to look at our own internal driving forces, letting go of that actual external event and not blaming it, rather considering how that thing that had happened to me is affecting me now and why, and helping me to deal with it and understand it and utilize it for spiritual growth. As I understand IFS, and again, I'm a novice, but I'm sold. From my grounding in Swedenborg and numerous discussions with Van Dusen, first, I must be curious about my inner self. Why am I reacting this way? Second, I pause and I take time to reflect back and listen to my own inner wisdom, which I have been given, like to call the divine whisper, to understand this part of me, where it comes from and what it may be trying to protect me from feeling or controlling or interfering with. And finally, I can move to have compassion on it, rather than being mad at it or trying to forget it, overcome it, which has been the focus of behavioral psychology. It's a whole different way of looking at things than when I got my first degree in psychology 50 years ago. When I met Van Dusen at his home 30 years ago, he explained Swedenborg had opened his world to spiritual psychology. And he said, real psychology must deal with the whole person, not just the behavior, the conditioning, but the deeper spiritual dimension that give life its ultimate meaning. Again from Swedenborg, man, we'll use everyone, has been so created that while living in the body, one is at the same time in the spiritual world, and this by means of interiors of the mind. And Van Dusen, the exploration of inner experience is the most important journey a person can take. It's a journey toward the discovery and who and what we really are. And we are more than we normally think we are. Most people live in a fraction of their total being, unaware of those vast realms of consciousness available to us. So I think this symbiosis, it just creates a wonderful connection, and it opens the gifts of Swedenborg's writings to a new audience, a young audience, a new use, and a new understanding of what Swedenborg understood 300 years ago, that Van Dusen grabbed a hold of 200 years ago and used in his practice. And now also IFS is bringing forth for a process to follow. Swedenborg knew that his own internal exploration, that we have this inner spiritual capacity that can perceive truth and goodness, and we need to turn our attention inward and receptive to the spiritual influences rather than being caught up in only external concerns of what's happened to us. And this is how we can find peace and harmony in our lives. To listen again to 1 Kings. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. The Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. After the fire came the gentle whisper, the divine whisper. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. That was fantastic. As you know, Jane, we open it up to discussion if anybody has
Great.
any questions or comments. Everybody, we just keep it tight if you have a question or comment, so everybody gets a chance who would like to. I just want to kick it off with a question. IFS, how would you describe what that does? Internal family systems, like what is if you would say it in a, what's the crux of it?
For me, and I can
Yeah.
only answer for me, it is that difference of just looking at things externally that have happened in our lives and trying to explain why we act the way we do by those external influences. And instead, you listen, and we all have these voices in our head. When maybe we're all partly psychotic, but we have these voices that seem to conflict often. Why did you do that? You shouldn't have responded that way. You beat yourself up. Every time I give a message or preach at church, afterwards I have this conflict within me. Was this good enough? What should I have said? And so instead of just saying, oh, just be quiet, leave me alone, you go, where did this come from? What do I have within me that feels that I'm not good enough? That feels I'm inadequate. And then you follow it back. And you can find those times in your life where maybe you were treated that way and that has gotten stuck within you. So this is a process. Once you find that, maybe 5-year-old that somebody didn't, told me I couldn't do something. I remember when I was told that I couldn't sing. And, those voices from way back when, they stay with you. And so you bring it forward and you hold it and listen to what the divine whisper within you is saying about that. that time in your life, and you kind of tell that part, I'm not there anymore. I can speak in front of people. Not that I'm going to not be nervous, but you try to open it up and look at it in a more wholesome way. And I know that wasn't a short answer, but that's the best I can offer.
That was a great answer. Kevin, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to comment that Bob Falconer actually is, at the end of the day, part of what really led me to attend these services, the Swedenborgian services. I would just want to say he's an incredible, beautiful soul. And I think listening to some of what he has to offer out there on videos and is a great way to understand IFS better. And what part to what Jane was saying, just reconciling these conflicting voices in our head that sometimes on the surface seem like, cruel internal voices, which if we really examine them, have an intention of trying to protect us. And then discerning, finding out in that exploration of our different, internal voices, which ones are, what the real intention is, and honoring, that maybe they have what our best interest in heart, even if they developed a bad mechanism, but there's a way to integrate all that. So I just wanted to make that comment that Bob Falconer is really an incredible person with a harrowing story, and just has so much to offer, and led me here. So
Thank you, Kevin. Here's his book. This is The Others Within Us, Internal Family Systems, Forest Mind. This is the one that, but I understand he's writing another book that's coming out. This is quite intense. I don't have this one marked up quite as much as I have Opening the Other World, with all of my what I go back to help understand. Is that backwards? It is, isn't it? Oh, okay. Just backwards for me. So these, Katerina said she would send out later the information, and also the book by Wilson Van Dusen, The Presence of Other Worlds, the information of if you want to go deeper. And I guess today my goal is really just to create curiosity within you if you haven't heard about IFS, or even if you've been working on it, the connections with Wilson Van Dusen and Emanuel Swedenborg, to me, fill in a lot of the gaps. But thank you, Kevin. I hope I meet him someday.
Yes, and it's just so beautifully serendipitous that Kevin, who's been coming to church, this is his path, and Jane, you're speaking to it. So that's beautiful. I have another question from Matthias.
Oh, but wait, it's not serendipitous. I call it Goddipity.
That's right. You have your own. Matthias says, thank you, Matthias here. My question is from a religious perspective. Are the voices within us coming from other spiritual entities like God, or malevolent entities?
And I believe in reading what Richard Schwartz is offering on his course, he's going to address that, because yes, there are both. And Bob Faulkner talks, and Chelsea, they talk about this, and because Swedenborg talks about this too, there being the positive influences and the negative influences, and they explain how when you're trying to follow up on one of these thoughts or something that's within your head, and some people would just say, but that's just not me. It's not me. It's something that feels bad within me that's causing me to do this, or I don't know why. I can't find that within myself. There are other influences, and I don't understand a lot of that myself. I'm still working on it.
Robert.
Thanks. Thank you, Jane. That was fascinating.
Hi, Robert.
Hello, Jane. I have a couple comments, because this is the kind of thing that Cal Turley was working on back in the 70s, early 80s. His main guy was an Italian psychologist named Assagioli, who talked also about integrating all the different voices and selves within us until we got them in the right order, which I think is part of what IFS is aiming for, that we have these different inhabitants. And one of the things I learned along the way was that they all belong. Now, we just had a question about the spiritual influences that surround us, but that's all they are. They're influences until we choose to make them our own and appropriate them. So, and that's what becomes our inner self and our inner world. And I think one of Van Dusen's quotes was, we have this, it's a landscape, it's got inhabitants, it's got laws, it's truly a complete inner world. And they all suggest that we get familiar with it. We're very familiar with the outer world and all the people in it. And we need to be, as your talk suggests, to be as attentive and to the inner world. But of course, as I want to go back to my point that all of these voices have a role to play and can be heard. And you mentioned the word compassion, which is really what it takes, because a lot of these voices feel very upset if they're not, given priority. And so like a small child who wants to dominate, or like a minister who wants to talk on and on, like myself, they need to be, heard and calmed down and not dismissed or disciplined. So that's just my only thing, is to be kind to ourselves on all levels, and let the true self emerge. So thanks again. That's my comment.
Thank you, Robert. I wasn't aware of what Cal Turley had written. I need to follow up on that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also the other book by Van Dusen, more appropriate, is The Natural Depth in Man, where he goes through the different levels of consciousness that are within everyone, and somewhat of a more interesting read.
Well, Jane, you were talking a little bit about a continuum, and I just looked a little, I hate those definitions on computers, but what you've been speaking of with the internal family systems would be an integration of the various aspects of ourselves that are protecting what is ultimately the core of who we are spiritually, right? So what we're trying to do is integrate things. I have to say, and this is not a question, Rich, I'm sorry, it's really quick. I was in a class with Devin Zuber recently on Van Dusen's last book, which is called Beauty, Wonder, and the Mystical Mind. And what I see that is as a culmination of his own learnings and thinkings about spiritual paths and so on, because it is a beautiful book. It's a lovely book. It's not as deeply spiritual or philosophical or psychological as his works originally were, because it is his last book. But that feels to me like what we're talking about here is like the integration of everything comes together into a kind of cohesive whole that is calm and peaceful and finished. Oh, that's all. Hi, Jane.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, Chris. Yes, and I think that I'm ready for when we move into the physical illnesses and spirituality also.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's going to be the field that's just going to open up, and they're going to find more and more connections with it. So I worked as a chaplain in my career at a large level 1 trauma center, and I'm getting a back feed from something. But interestingly, I had these 3 women, and they all had a similar diagnosis, and they had to be kept until their numbers, this was many years ago, so they probably improved on it, but they had to get their white blood cell count up to a certain level in order to go home. And one woman was not married. One woman was married to this man that was just very attentive, and he was always there helping and taking care of her. And the other woman, the man was pretty attentive too, but the difference between those two is the one gentleman was attentive when she was in the hospital, but not that attentive otherwise at home. And it took her twice as long for her numbers to come back up, her white blood cell count to come back up. And this is a small sample, but I just think we have no idea how much our spirit affects our total body healing. not just spiritual or just mental, but it's wide open.
Jane, I've done some what I would call my coaching practice parts work, very similar, same, just different words. But I just tell you one interesting experience I had with it. You were facilitating different parts of yourself, and almost like a conference room. Like I had in a conference room all the different voices of myself. What was interesting was how the voices were kind of criticizing or shouting down my spiritual voice as being too practical and not financially viable, and has taken us down the wrong path before, and sort of discouraging my spiritual life. So I thought that was, and that was that kind of work, and it was, whoa, okay, they were, constantly shutting it down. I think to Matea's part, when you read Swedenborg, there's definitely a tension around us all the time of different voices, of angelic voices who are guiding us that whisper, and there's also voices that will come up that will say, and you'll know they're not from God because they'll say like, "You're so stupid. Nobody likes you. You just screwed that up." I mean, this is never from the heavens. This is always from the hells. So we do have to discern where those voices are coming from because they can really upset us, and we can actually pray them away. We can acknowledge them and say, "Hey, you're not. I know where you're coming from. You're not what I'm aligning to." But there, I
Yes.
think we are in the tension of different voices, and so some folks, I know particularly when I do coaching with people and they have no spiritual background, can be dominated by what I would say are demonic or hellish voices. I have to be very careful in explaining that to people who are secular because it sounds like, like what? But I do believe those are the forces are at work. So I think and I think right now in our culture, maybe we're coming to the end of a period, but we've been so focused on the outside, like you were saying, Jane, so looking outside. I'm going to make money. I'm going to be successful. I'm going to have a great house. I'm going to have a great career. I'm going to be respected. I'm going to be liked. I'm going to have this retirement fund. I'm not, everything is, and it's so materialistic that we've quieted our inner voice. We've lost it. And I personally, to your point with Chris, I do believe the anxiety that's rising up among younger people right now is directly connected to that. And I think they're on to something that they're not buying into the go-go culture of their parents so much of financial, and they're questioning it. And that could be a chance to look within. So I think this is a fascinating topic that you've opened up for us, Jane, today. Is there any final comment or question before we move on?
Quick question. Hi, Jane. This is Jason. I guess what I'm wondering is, under this method, are you looking for one voice to become the predominant voice and to basically tell the others, no, you're not who's going to be the one that's driving this person. I'm the one, and because I'm the better voice than the others.
There is the one voice, and they often use the self with a capital S, and that's also that inner sense, that divine wisdom, or that divine whisper, as I like to call it, because you have to calm yourself down. You have to be curious. You have to be quiet in order to hear it. But I don't think it ever says I'm better than you, or it says I understand you. I understand why you think you need to protect this person, or why your voice is coming out at this time. And that's the part that we play in it too, in that temptation. And we offer ourselves to look at this and why is that there? What's causing that? And that's when we have the curiosity and we step back from it, and we keep going deeper and deeper within, trying to understand why and where it comes from. And then it's tried the ultimate of bringing the inner and the exterior together are what is. That's where that divine self is, that oneness that gives us harmony and peace. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Kevin, did you have something more to say? I see you blinking on and off.
Nope, that was an accident.
Oh, okay. But thank you. Yeah.
I have a thing with
Yes, Carol.
incorporation with your white blood cells and things like that. When I was in a teenager, there was an experiment done at a hospital where they took a third of the people and told them they were being prayed for. Then they took a third and they didn't tell them they were being prayed for, but they were. And then they had, another group that they didn't. And the group that knew they were prayed for, they got quicker, faster. The people that were prayed but didn't know it also got done, and the other group didn't do as well as the first two groups. So that was just a little experiment they had done about prayer.
Yeah,
And I still love one of Swedenborg's quotes that, and it's not just Swedenborg, but all things are connected, and anything that's not connected will disappear. So finding Swedenborg and Van Dusen and Cal Turley, best, it's all connected, and as we increase in our understanding, but it's so hard scientifically, like you talked about, Carol, they were able to show the difference, but that seems to be the crux of where the problem comes from in trying to prove anything, because we have to leave some mystery in it, or some openness for the divine, which we can't explain.
And Glenn, you wrote, "Be curious, not judgmental." Walt Whitman.
Yes. Thanks, Glenn. Good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for that incredible sharing and for the conversation that you opened up with our group, and it had some Godipity, as you were mentioning, of connections with people in the group, which was really wonderful. It's always great to have.
You.
So thank you.
And for any of you that are able, get out and look at the moon tonight. It's a blood moon. There's an eclipse. There's a lot going on. And that's a time for transformation and change within all of us. Thank you, Rich.